Welcome to another edition of Talking Music, and for the fourth hour of my Now 2 marathon for the radio, we had some time to fill because the songs ran out on Now 2 after about 20 minutes, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I focused on what I thought was my favourite album that was kind of featured on Now 2. Paul McCartney sang Pipes of Peace, and I love Pipes of Peace. It's a brilliant album, one of my favourites, it really is. So I invited my friend Craig Whitfield to talk about Paul McCartney and Pipes of Peace for my radio show, and here is the result as part of this special edition of Talking Music.
It's interesting, actually, because I first became aware of Paul McCartney when I was listening to my mum's old 7-inch singles, which were very heavily the Beatles and Elvis Presley. And I used to play them on my old record player. So McCartney was in my consciousness from a young age. I think Pipes of Peace came out around 1983. And it followed on from, I think it was Paul McCartney's third individual album called Tug of War, which I absolutely loved. There were some great tracks on Tug of War, and I think it's, in many ways, in my judgment, probably a more superior album to Pipes of Peace. But I do love Pipes of Peace. I think Pipes of Peace followed the following year in I think Tug of War was 1982, Pipes of Peace was 1983. But I have to say, I think Pipes of Peace is a very good album as well. I just don't think it has as a collective, probably not as great a collection of songs, but there are some great individual tracks.
Well, I know it's a tough question, Craig, but what would you say is your favourite track off the album? Can you pick just one, perhaps?
This is a tough one. I like Pipes of Peace. I always loved the video. The video always spoke to me. The Germans and the English on Christmas Day playing football in no man's land. It wasn't just a great song, but actually it was a great video that accompanied it, and it lives long in the memory. Yeah, Say 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 was obviously a great track with Michael Jackson. And I also liked The Other Me. I like So Bad. An Average Person. So, and Through Our Love as well. So there's a lot of great songs on it. In terms of my favourite, it has to be Pipes of Peace, but leaving the obvious aside, then I would probably go with Average Person. I love that song. I love it. I love listening to it in the car. It's a great car song. So I think they're probably my favourite tracks. That might surprise you because I know there's some other good tracks on there as well, but I think they're the two that I'd probably go with.
And how do you think Pipes of Peace stands up against McCartney's other work? Obviously, there's a lot to choose from. I love Flaming Pie. That's one of my favourites. I love McCartney 3. I thought that was a great album last year. How do you think it compares?
In terms of how the album stands up against his other albums, I think it's one of his better individual albums. That said, I still think Tug of War is a great album. I actually still think In My Regards to Broad Street's a fine album with some great songs on it and some great reworked Beatles stuff as well, which I really like. And then, of course, if you press on a little bit further, then Flowers in the Dirt takes some beating. I think that's still, for me, one of his standout solo albums. But there have been others in more recent times which are okay. I think some of his later stuff has fine individual tracks, but I don't think they're particularly as strong in terms of as an album. But he's still having his moments, and I think given everything he's done and achieved with the Beatles and Wings and his solo career, the fact that he's still relevant and still producing the goods and can still produce a number one album. I think New was a number one album. You'll correct me if any subsequent albums have been number ones, but he's still producing the goods. I think my greatest Paul McCartney memory is when I used to go to Blackpool with my mum and dad, and we used to walk up and down the Golden Mile, and No More Lonely Nights was the song I always used to hum in my head whilst I was walking because I was bored. So every time I go to Blackpool, I always think about that. So I think that's my thoughts on Pipes of Peace. I think it's a good album. I think it's a solid album. I think it holds up against a lot of his other strong albums as well. And yeah, I think it stands the test of time. I mean, I can still listen to it in the car now. I actually have the album and I can listen to it in the car, and I still think it's a great album to listen to. So it must be doing something.
Thanks to Craig Whitfield there, and we'll have another Pipes of Peace interview. Take a look very soon where we'll be interviewing Beatles YouTuber Andrew Dixon, and he'll be giving his insight into Pipes of Peace as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That's it from me. Bye for now.